story of Absalom, which you find in, you're going to get your Bible and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 13. 2 Samuel 13, we start on Absalom. And about the next 6, 7 chapters deal with Absalom and all the goings on there, and it is an absolute soap opera. It's just an absolute soap opera. And trying to keep up with who's married to who and whose daughter's who. And so I had to print out a roadmap. So I found this. I would like to tell you, I researched this, but I found it on the internet. And so we'll, hopefully, if you didn't get a copy, we'll make you a copy. But it kind of it kind of helped me to understand who the brothers are and who the wives are and whose children belongs to who. But it was if you go back through and read it and kind of look at that, then you kind of, or help me to figure out who exactly the players are and who we're talking about here. So yeah, so Absalom, it is a soap opera. It is a soap opera. So we will talk about that tonight, and the title of the lesson is A Father Failure. So we'll certainly be trying to delve into how did this happen? How did this family get in this shape? And the author here seems to think it's a father failure, and we will talk about that. So before we begin, Derek, would you lead us in prayer, please? Amen. Thank you. And there are some extra books here if anybody needs a book. I don't know if some of the visitors need a book. Everybody good? Okay, so the verse we're 2 Samuel 13 through 15 is our references for tonight. The verse that it says that leads the lesson off is, in this manner Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So I guess we need to, let's first figure out who Absalom is. Who exactly is Absalom? Let's get our little chart out. I got a pointer. And so, okay, we start up here with David, all right? So David's our main character. We see that his father was Jesse, grandfather's Obed, and then the great-grandparents are Boaz and Ruth, which is always very interesting to get that history. But, so we're going to talk about Absalom. This top line is all David's brothers and sisters. So we'll see their names pop up. This Shammai is also called Shimei, so you'll see that name a few times. But that's all the brothers and sisters, and we'll be talking about some of them. And then these, unfortunately, are all of David's wives. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wives, and we know of at least 10 concubines. And then you go to the children, and who are they the children of? And so you'll see the line leading to the children and who they belong to, or who the mother is. They're all David's children. So there's lots of half-brothers and sisters here. And then we get to David and Bathsheba's children, Solomon, Shammuz, Shobad, Nathan, and we know they had one more that died that is unnamed, so they had 5 children. And then Solomon, then you get to all of his mess. 700 wives and 300 concubines. We got some people that are very much part of this story. Joab. Joab is who?
Is he the leader of the mighty men? David's mighty men?
Yes, he's the leader of David's army. Joab and Amasa. which is another player that gets involved, and actually, as it points out there, Joab killed him. So all the one with X's on them all die. So there's a lot of murder, a lot of stuff going on here. But anyway, so we're talking about right now about Absalom. So Absalom is the son of who? Maacah and David, okay? And Absalom's sister is Tamar. And so that's full-blooded brothers and sisters. And the rest of these would be half brothers and sisters. And Amnon is the one we read about early, and his big sins and mistakes. So I guess the author of this wants us to understand that all of these, or a lot of these problems that we see here, of all these X's, are caused by David and all of his wives and all of the family and half brothers and sisters and conflict and who's in charge and who's going to be the next king, and all those things take place during these accounts. And so hopefully the chart will help us to better keep track, maybe understand a little bit when we read these names. Everybody good so far? So our book says God has a special role for fathers in the home. So we're talking particularly about David here. In the New Testament, fathers are urged to not provoke your children to wrath, but to bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6:4. Absentee fathers who do not guide their homes and their children are left without any moral compass. Evil fathers teach their children evil by their words and deeds, and they often become what they grow up seeing. And we know that in our society today. It's hard for families and children when they grow up seeing something to break out of that mode. On the other hand, righteous fathers intentionally train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart. Proverbs 22:6. When a child has godly parents, they're encouraged to hear the instruction of their father. Do not forsake the law of your mother, for they be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. Proverbs 1:8 and 9. So he's leading to the fact that, you know, if David had been the kind of father, if David had had one wife and been the kind of father that we read about in the Bible, then all of this soap opera that begins to take place here in chapter 13 perhaps would not have occurred. Last paragraph, we have noted in previous lessons how David seems to have had a woman weakness. I think that's kind of an understatement. Seems to have had a woman weakness. He married several wives. Well, let's look at that just for a second. 2 Samuel chapter 3. So we know where all these wives come from. 2 Samuel chapter 3. And if we read verses 1 through 5, it'll give us kind of a snapshot of where we find all this. Starting in verse 1, now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. We have talked about that. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon. And so we see Amnon right there. David's firstborn by, and I don't know how to say her name. Say again? Ahinoam. I'm going to go with that. Ahinoam. By Ahinoam the Jezreelite. His second wife, Chileab, by Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. Talked about Abigail. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, I don't know how to say that one, Shephatiah, the son of Abadiah, whatever. And the sixth, Ethream, by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. So these were the children that were born while David was in Hebron, and he was there 7.5 years, I think, and then he was in Jerusalem 33 years. So he's king for 40 years. But Yeah, so there's where we get started in the list of these wives that we find in 2 Samuel 3. He said he married several wives, and not always for the right reason. 2 Samuel 11 starts the story of when he's in Jerusalem with Bathsheba, so we know that was not exactly the right reason. When a man has multiple children from multiple wives, there will inevitably be parenting problems. I think we could all agree with that. Hard enough to be on the same page with one wife. Imagine trying to parent with multiple wives, all these half brothers and sisters. Miscommunication, lack of communication, discipline can get complicated. And we see that discipline did get complicated. Absalom's full-blooded sister, Tamar, right there, from their mother was Maacah, is raped by her half-brother and discarded as waste. David, the father, is angry about it, but does nothing. We'll look at those verses. Imagine the hurt. As a result, Absalom is left angry with both his half-brother and the lack of action from his father, so he takes matters into his own hands. What we see in the following story helps us to see how a family can begin to unravel when a father does not lead his home and his authority is disrespected. Even when our fathers fail, there's a lesson we must learn on how to avoid the sins of Absalom. So that's what we're going to talk about, is Absalom and how and the things that took place and how we hopefully can avoid such things. So let's look at the first one with Tamar. So that kind of gets the story started in chapter 13. 2 Samuel chapter 13. So we finished up, and we talked about 2 Samuel 12. We finished up, David is being very successful. He's a warrior, and he's conquering, and he's done, he has grown, and things are going well with him. But then his family kind of falls apart. In verse 13:1. After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. So strange deal here. You got this son of David from Ahinoam, I think he said. And then we've got Tamar and Absalom here from Maacah. So this Amnon is fallen in love with Tamar, which is obviously his half-sister, which is obviously a problem. So, long story, it goes through this whole story. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar, they became sick, and she was a virgin, and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend, his name was Jonadab, and he was the son of Shimei, David's brother. Jonadab was a very crafty man, and they come up with this plan that allows David to agree to let Tamar go in and take care of Amnon, who is acting like he is really sick. And if you read through the story, you get down to verse 12. Amnon's trying to force her into having sex with him. She says, no, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing, and where would I take my shame? And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel. Therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you, which she seems to think if they spoke to David about it, he would let those two be together. I don't know if that's a true story or not, but that's what she seemed to think. However, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. And many other versions say he raped her and lay with her. And then Amnon hated her after that, and she she was just kind of put out. And Tamar, in verse 19, then Tamar put ashes on her head, tore a robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went away crying bitterly. Absalom saw what had happened to his sister, and says he's obviously very upset about it. Get down to verse 21. When David heard of these things, he was very angry. So David hears about it, he's very angry. But what does he do? He didn't do anything. 22, Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon. He hated him for it because he had forced his sister Tamar. So we get this whole story about two half brothers and the dissension that's there and the hate that's there, and Amnon rapes his half sister, and just terrible story. And you wonder why they acted this way, and you keep on reading about Absalom, and he did not take this well. So what did he do? I'm tired of reading. What did Absalom do? How did he get revenge in this situation?
Well, 2 years went by.
Okay, he waited 2 years, and then what did he do?
He had a party where they were going to shear sheep.
Okay, he had a sheep shearing party. So what we kind of talked about this in one of our lessons. What was the big deal about sheep shearing? Anybody remember? It was a big deal. When that happened, it was a big celebration. They had tended the sheep, and now they were ready to get some reward from the wool of the sheep. So the sheep shearing was a big deal. So evidently 2 years had passed, sheep were ready to be sheared. Absalom decides to have a big sheep shearing party. Miss Carol, go ahead. You're doing well.
So he wanted King David and all his brothers to come to this party.
Wanted King David and all their brothers to come,
But King David said he didn't want to go.
but David decided not to go. Okay?
But he wanted especially Amon to come.
Okay, but he.
And so when all the brothers went too, because they got really upset after Amon was killed and got
Okay.
on their mules and went home.
So all the brothers went to this sheep shearing.
Yes. And
And-
they got Amon drunk, and one of the servants killed him.
Okay.
And it scared the other brothers. They jump on their mules and they go back to the palace. But in the meantime, David hears that all his sons have been killed. But then here comes Jodab, and he says no, it was just Amon. So David exiled Absalom to, and I didn't realize he went to live with his mother's family
Okay.
in Gershur.
Okay, class is over. Did y'all get all that?
Well, I thought it was a terrible story.
It was a terrible story. So the sheep shearing, if y'all didn't hear, Absalom devised this plan, and he got alone with Amnon. Am I saying that word right? Amnon.
Amnon.
And killed him with a no, he had his servants kill him. Yeah. And 22. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, "Watch now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant." So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule and fled. So they headed back. As Miss Carol said, David hears that all of his sons have died. He's very upset, and he finds out only one has died, and that is Amnon. And how did he take that? I know how David took that Amnon had died. Okay, tore his garments, laid on the earth. It upset him. He was very upset that Amnon had died, even though Amnon obviously was not a good person because of what he had done to Tamar. So Absalom fled. He went to Geshur, And he was there, how long, Miss Carol?
Was he there 2 years or 3 years?
In verse 38 said he fled and was there 3 years.
3 years.
So he was there 3 years. Absalom was there. And how did David, how do you feel about Absalom?
Missed him.
He missed him, didn't he? So David's heart, he's still, all that's going on and all he knows about what Absalom has done. David, 39, longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. But he longed to see Absalom again. So, I've answered all these questions, I guess. Number one was what happened between Amnon and Tamar. We've kind of knocked that out. He was in love with her, even though it was his half-sister. And he lied and tricked David and raped her. And then, terrible situation ensued. In what ways had David unknowingly contributed to this devastating event? What did he know or what didn't he know about what was about Tamar?
Well, he told her to go.
Yeah, he told her to go. Amnon had asked for her, and he told her to go. So obviously he contributed to this taking place, which certainly was not good. And maybe he should have known more about it than he did. Thoughts or comments on that first question?
It was forbidden by the law of Moses
Okay.
to have relationships in the family.
Okay. So Paul says it was forbidden by the law of Moses to have relationships within the family. I think that is true. So there was multiple sins that take place here, and these sons of David and all these wives and all the issues that they bring up. Again, to me, it's just a big soap opera. But question 2, how does David feel about this sin, and what does he do about it?
Well, he was angry, but there wasn't a record of punishment.
Okay, he was angry, but there was no record of him having a conversation with Absalom about this at all. And so I would think that is a problem. How does Absalom feel about what has transpired, and what does he do about it?
Well, he had no remorse,
Had no remorse for sure.
and he left.
And he left and went to Geshur. Was he wrong to have taken this upon himself? Was he wrong to have taken this upon himself with what happened with Tamar?
Wasn't it King David's position to punish?
Question was it King David's position to punish Amnon,
And then Absalom.
and then later Absalom?
Yeah.
What do y'all think about that? Mr. Bridgman?
Well, David should have done something about it, obviously.
Yeah.
The king, he should have stepped in and be like, this is what the law says we should do. Leviticus 18 does say you shouldn't lay with a close relative, either your daughter, your mother, your daughter, your father, either way. And I mean, there's so many things on top of that as well. It is interesting because the closest relative is usually supposed to be like the avenger of blood, that is said. And I think in this case he goes too far with what he should have done. But I think he saw that as his opportunity. If no one else is doing it, I gotta step up. I gotta do something.
Yeah.
Not that it was right, but that's.
Yep. And and he let it tarry for 2 years. So he's letting that fester, I would say, and he certainly didn't get it off his heart. And we see what happened there.
I mean, maybe he's reacting, I think, to me, how a normal dad would react, or should react. This is the problem with David having so many wives and concubines. I mean, he probably had a hard time getting close to any of his children because he had so many and so many wives. And so Absalom obviously was close to Tamar because he was directly led there.
were full.
I mean, obviously David was direct, well, but there's so many, and all the responsibility and roles he had, who knows how close he was with his family.
Yeah,
I just feel like if the relationship with him and Tamar was a true, like, that was his daughter, and that was his one wife, I'm guessing this would have been a much different decision and
Okay.
situation. But that goes back to that, this goes back to the original issue of, that's why this is a mess.
Yeah.
Because of all of what David had started with all this.
yes. So he created this extreme situation, and to your point, yeah, maybe he didn't have the relationship with any of these kids that maybe he should have had. So, yeah, big problem.
And you have to give Absalom some credit, he did take Tamar into his home.
Yep. Ms. Carroll said we have to give Absalom a little bit of credit, and we'll give him a little bit, because he did take Tamar in, and that she lived with Absalom, as far as we know, I guess, until he died.
But Nathan told David this is gonna happen.
Okay,
Regardless of, I mean, I'm sure he wasn't an upstanding father, but Nathan said, because of what you've done, this stuff's gonna happen to in your family.
yeah,
You know, so God's faithful, he's gonna promise.
Okay.
He promise it's gonna happen.
good point. God's faithful to his promises, and he certainly had told David through the prophet Nathan that we talked about last week, that because of this sin with Bathsheba, that there is going to be bloodshed and turmoil within your family going forward.
The sword would never leave his house.
Sword would never leave his house. Is that what the words exactly say? Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I hate to speculate.
Okay. Roger hates to speculate, but he's going to speculate.
I've always found it interesting that right after she's sent away, she's weeping out loud, and just obviously you can tell she's distraught. But in chapter 13 and verse 20, I've always found it interesting. The question, when Absalom sees her, the first thing he said, or at least all that's recorded is, has Amnon your brother been with you?
Yes.
That seems to suggest, again, we don't know, but there seems to have been some obvious signs of his attraction to her.
Okay.
Why would Absalom, first thing, have said, has Amnon done this?
Yeah.
He doesn't ask her who. But why would Amnon's name
Come up.
Right, you know, I've just found that's always kind of struck me as there must have been some evidence from other. I mean, you can see when someone has an attraction. I mean, you can see it. I've always wondered if this was visible and known to others, and nobody had said anything.
Yeah. And Absalom, being the full brother, probably would have known more than anybody what Tamar may have.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
not really a point or anything.
Okay.
Jonadab says in 13 verse, somewhere said that, why are you haggard, morning after morning? So Jonadab could see it
Yeah.
clearly.
But he didn't know why.
Right, yeah, he had explained.
Absalom says,
Yeah, this is why.
is it, you know,
Your brother, yeah.
Yep.
has Amnon done this?
Yeah.
I find it interesting too, that when he learned that he thought all the sons had been killed, he was very upset. But
Yeah.
I guess it didn't change when he found out only Absalom or
Yeah.
Amnon had been
Amnon.
killed.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
He still got some sense.
Okay, so that kind of, I mean, this saga just keeps rolling here. So we get, so question number 3, what must Absalom do because of his crime? And 2 Samuel 13, 34 through 39. I'll just, 34 through 39. Somebody want to read that? 2 Samuel 13, 34 through 39.
But Absalom fled, and the young man that kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there came much people by the way of the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said unto the king, Behold, the king's sons king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and there was for 3 years. And the soul of King David longed to go forth unto Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Ammon, seeing that he was dead.
Okay, so we see that Absalom fled there, and he went to Geshur, and he's there 3 years. And why does Absalom get to return to Jerusalem, which we start in chapter 14 and verse 1? So somebody just tell me, how does he get to return?
Joab.
Joab, what does Joab do?
He talks to David.
He talks to a gal, a wise
Oh, okay,
woman.
Yeah, the woman.
Wise woman.
A wise woman, yes.
From where? Tekoa. Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman and gave her this big story to go in to David to tell.
Right.
And what is the story? Somebody give me the Reader's Digest version. What is the story?
One of her sons killed another one of his sons, and according to the law, the son that killed the other has to die as well. But it would upset everyone if that kid was dead, because that's the only son they have left. And so David got upset. He's a sucker for stories like that.
It's the second time he's fell for a story like this, but go ahead.
Yeah, he was like, you go, don't you worry, I'll take care of it. And just basically, I got his back.
Okay.
And she had the great reveal, actually, this was your son. Isn't that you? And he was all like, Joab shoved to this thing.
So I guess Joab is, we've already said, he is David's I guess head commander in chief, and he could tell that David was longing to see Absalom, and so he concocts this story, and David, that is what has happened here. We can't let him die, or we can't have him banished for this long a period of time. So they agreed to let Absalom come back to Jerusalem. But what was the stipulation?
Could not come in David's presence.
Okay, he couldn't come in David's presence. David could not see him, which doesn't seem like a great consolation to me. I don't know if he wanted him to come back so bad, why would he not want to see him? Anybody got a thought on that one?
Maybe he wanted to keep an eye on it.
Well, yeah, not really. He didn't want to see him. He didn't want to keep an eye. Maybe he wanted to know what he was doing in town and what was going on with him. And did he have the right to want to know that? From what we see later with Absalom. Yeah. So Absalom shows up in town, and what does he start to do?
He starts to look like a king.
Oh, he starts to look like a king. So he stands where and starts meeting the people as they come in.
Front door of the palace.
It's at the city gate, the front gate, and people come in and want to see the king. And what does Absalom tell them?
Ready to hear your complaints.
Yeah, let me hear your complaint. I'll take care of your problem. If I were the king, I would make sure justice was done. And did the people go for this? What are the characteristics that Absalom had that everybody seemed to like? Especially the females. I don't know about the males. Well, what about the females? Let's look at 2 Samuel 15, verse 25. No blemish. Now in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. Okay? From the sole of his head to the crown of his feet, there was no blemish in him. So we got this really, really good-looking guy. Evidently, he's got a ton of charisma, and he don't mind stretching the truth or telling things that are not exactly true. And then what about verse 26? What do we know about his head? Jonathan, what do we know about his head? Men, you had this conversation this morning. He's handsome like you, and his hair is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, he's got lots and lots of hair, and he goes on to say he gets it cut once a year. Once a year, and how much hair does he gather up?
I don't know, but it's a weight, isn't it?
200 shekels. Everybody says that's 5 pounds. 5 pounds of hair seems like a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. So Absalom, good-looking guy, evidently able to grow lots of hair, and he's got lots of characteristics that people fall for, and yeah. So he is trying to garner supporters so that he can usurp David and take over the kingdom. I mean, he is trying to do his best to take over the kingdom.
Well, he's a people person.
He is a people person. He is. He is that. Verse 28, Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem, but did not see the king's face. We talked about that. He never saw. And then he devises another plan that he wants to see David. And what is an odd story, another soap opera. What does he do to get to see the king?
Well, he summons Joab.
Yeah, he wanted Joab to come and talk to him. Joab wouldn't come. So what did he do to Joab?
He set his field on fire.
He set his field on fire.
That got his attention.
Yeah, that Joab came then, didn't he? Why did you set my field on fire? He said, well, I told you I wanted to see David and you wouldn't come, so I've set your field on fire. Craziness going on. But he got to go see the king. Joab went to the king, told him, and when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king, bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. So Absalom had a plan and worked his plan and required Joab to lose a few crops, but crazy story.
Is that like kissing makeup?
Yeah, I mean it is an odd story.
But yeah, Absalom is obviously very patient and crafty.
Very crafty.
But very, very under the radar kind of patient. He waits 2 years in both instances to do the plans he had concocted in both situations.
Yes.
I mean, really well thought out in how he was doing this, never really using himself directly, either using servants or something to carry out all these actions that he's doing. So he's obviously very intelligent, but very, very crafty in how he's devised all this.
Okay. And then we get to chapter 15, and Absalom he tells David, I've got to go to Hebron? Is it Hebron? And because I've made a vow and I've got to go there and fulfill my vow. David allows that to happen. He's kind of beguiled again. And then we see that when Absalom gets there, he kind of appoints himself king and starts to gather. And he does have a large following, a lot of folks with him. And he gathers a large following and calls himself king. And they blew the trumpet. And verse 10 it said Absalom reigns in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men invited from Jerusalem. And they went along and listened to that. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gileonite, David's counselor. And the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number. So the numbers increase, and we get Absalom is growing. David hears about it, and is he fearful? So what does he do?
He leaves Jerusalem.
He leaves Jerusalem. He gathers his folks and leaves Jerusalem because he's afraid that Absalom is going to come in and destroy them. And then we get, and we're not going to have time for it, but we get into this long debate and some bad advice. And finally there is a huge battle, and David's side wins, and Absalom loses how many men? I mean, it's a huge battle. I think it's 20,000. I mean, it's a big number. Somebody find that one for me. That die in this battle. And so one of the commentaries I was reading said, you know, we got, not only does Absalom die, we finished that off. How does Absalom die?
His hair caught.
Again?
Oh, his hair caught.
Yeah, he's fleeing and on his donkey, and all this hair he's got gets caught in a tree, an oak tree. And finally, Joab come and they kill him. And so Absalom is killed. David, how does David take that? He's very upset about it. Oh, Absalom, we'll get all that story. And I guess none of this had to happen, or would have happened, and you get all the way back to David. If David had not had all these wives, all these children, then these 20,000 people, along with Absalom, certainly would not have died. And so that, I think that's what the author of this is trying to tell us, and I think we surely see that in that. And the point is, permitting sin now lead to more sin later. And we talked about that with David, and now we talk about it more with David. He permitted this to go on. He delayed his action way too long, and the consequences were terrible. They were terrible for everybody. Point 2, one of the cruelest things we can do to our parents is to create civil war within the family due to our vengeance and disobedience. Certainly we see that with Absalom. Be a peacemaker. We talked about peacemaking, I think, on Sunday. Absalom may have thought he could undermine God's anointed king, but his assumptions weren't true. We cannot undermine King Jesus without consequences. You can't undermine Jesus without having consequences. So, lots and lots of, if you haven't read that, when you get down and start reading about 13, you can just read through 18, 19, and just be intrigued about it. I mean, it's an intriguing story. And now that you've got the family tree, you can say, okay, that's who that is, and that's how that plays in there. But the X's, Amnon's killed, Absalom's killed, Adonijah is killed, Amasa killed, Ashiel's killed, Joab's killed, and they're all killing each other, and it's all brothers and sisters, and just a mess. This David's family is just a mess, just as Nathan said it would be, just as he was promised that it would be. So, thank you all for tolerating me. I got a big kick out of Absalom. I guess we've got Joab Sunday, and a misguided king, Joab's view of David. So we'll look at that. Again, thank you all for your help tonight, and look forward to Sunday learning about Joab.